Hey everybody, Dr. Smith here. Just want to give you a quick, I hope just a 10-minute overview of what we're going to do on Wednesday. I haven't really been happy with how much I'm able to cover in terms of the Blake reading. I'm super happy with how the presenters are doing and the level to which the class is engaging with those articles from the Arnold and Duquette chapter, as well as the presenters' questions. Okay, so I'm going to try this technique for a couple weeks and see how it works. Okay, so tutorial. He circles back around in chapter 4 to talking about tutorial call and using call as a tool. The latter being what he calls social call. We'll talk about social call next week, but in the tutor metaphor, the learner interacts directly with the computer itself. That would be a program, a website, or other application, mobile app, etc. If you're using Duolingo, that is tutorial call. And the other one, social call, we won't talk about that, but that's basically using the computer as a vehicle, and Blake says that we should use both. Okay? Let me see here. Yeah, so Call as a tutor, it's a linear standalone program. Everything is pre-programmed. One exception is iCall, where basically it matches the nature of the feedback to the type of problem that you happen to be having. And we talked about social call already. Which one we choose, social call or tutorial call, there's not one is better than the other, but one is better than the other for your stated purpose. And then within tutorial call, you're going to have different affordances each program is going to have a different affordance, and you're really going to have to match it to the teacher's needs, the student's needs, programmatic needs, etc. Okay, we'll have an example here of Eliza. Okay, hello, I'm Eliza. Let's just see if it comes through here. Eliza, my foot hurts. Don't you ever say hello? See what she says to that. What does that suggest to you? Let's see what she says to this. Anyway, so it could go on forever and ever, right? The roots of tutorial call, that Eliza was from the 60s, and somebody still has a prototype of it running. Roots of tutorial call, we're going to talk about this in class. I'm going to show you this funny video, What's New Pussycat, and it really illustrates the pedagogy that came out of the behaviorist learning theory from the 50s, and all of this memorization, decontextualized stimulus response, call materials that we still see is still anchored in this old learning theory. Okay, Um, Blake suggests that these things are still around and that they still have some value, and they have some value. All right, oops, we're getting a little off the screen there, it looks like. I'm sorry about that. Not much I can do now since it's recording. Despite the field's fascination with social call, we still have 1 foot at least anchored in the tutorial phase. So that's what Blake suggests, and he's probably true. Lots of language startups like Duolingo, and they tend to just simply reproduce commonly held language fallacies like languages. It's easy to learn a language, or it's mostly about the vocabulary, etc. And he also suggests that apps are not vehicles for new ideas, but they're usually just digitizing old ideas. Yeah. So basically, Duolingo and Rosetta Stone are based on flashcards, right? Language startups are getting a little woke, as my daughter says. So they are hiring applied linguists. They are they're not just hiring programmers anymore, but they're hiring people that have language assessment backgrounds, applied linguistics, SLA backgrounds, etc. And they pay pretty well. So you should check into that. They're actually hiring right now. So if you go to Duolingo's website and look for current job openings, you'll find one in applied linguistics. Technological tools for supporting the skill areas. All right, well, he led into this area by talking about Dorothy Chun's work. I guess I have that on the next slide. So, but essentially vocabulary size impacts all 4 skill areas. So you can see why vocabulary or apps that are basically vocabulary learning could serve a really good purpose. Yeah, learners in the first year learn about 1,000 words of the 1,000 most common words. At least that's what we're shooting for, and then they need to know 3,000 to 5,000 words and their syntactic context in order to communicate effectively in the second language. And I think that we could say that tutorial call can be helpful in learning vocabulary, at least surface level vocabulary. And then here are some things that I invite you to have a look at that he mentioned. I don't think I just link right to the main company site, but usually I try to find a review of these sites. So have a look at that. I will upload this PowerPoint earlier. Blake suggests that vocabulary is very important and also quite well suited for call. He suggested that there's one reason that we have the flashcards is that learning vocabulary from context, like learning new vocabulary from reading, for example, is quite tricky because you need to know almost all the vocabulary in the text already before you can learn those new words from the context. He did mention concordance programs, and we'll talk about this in class too, but basically these can help teachers develop reading materials. One example I will show you is the Lex Tutor. It's called the Complete Lexical Tutor. It's a Canadian researcher who has made this freely available. It's pretty awesome. And okay, here we go again with this one. This was supposed to show up as one image, but as you can see, it's not. And we're going to copy and paste this into the Lexical Tutor. You're free to invited to go ahead and do that in advance if you have some time. But I used to actually post a Donald Trump speech, and then I don't think some students appreciated that. They thought I was making fun of him, but anyway, the Martin Luther King Jr. Speech, who can argue with that? So take a look at it, look at the lexical, the different types of words in there, look at how many common words he uses as opposed to the second most common words, like the first 1,000 and the second 1,000, and then more academic language. You can do lots of fun things with that Lexical Tutor, and in addition to creating like tests based on the text, like a closed test and things like that. So it's quite good, and it can basically show you, tell you whether your text that you're planning to use in class is maybe a little too advanced for your students. He talked about the research of Dorothy Chun, and she suggests that the 2 most important aspects of reading comprehension are vocabulary learning and automatic word recognition. And she's done a lot of research on multimodal annotations. So that is, an annotation is where a gloss is what we'd call it. You hover over this word recognition, and then a little pop-up window would show up that would either be a L1 translation, or a picture, or a animated GIF, or an audio file, depending on what your goals are. And her research also suggests that lexical knowledge, not grammatical knowledge, is significantly related to both reading and listening comprehension. So again, just kind of reaffirming how important vocabulary is, and therefore kind of giving the vocabulary, the learning apps that are essentially vocabulary based, cutting them a little bit of slack instead of saying, well, that's not how we learn languages. Well, no, but it's helpful for learning vocabulary, which is helpful for reading comprehension and listening comprehension, especially at the very early stages where if you don't have some vocabulary, you really can't get started with the language at all. And it's clear with the proliferation of mobile apps, most of which are vocabulary flashcards, how MAL, let's say, is how you can harness MAL for language learning. Okay. He also cited some research that shows explicit instruction has a positive impact on vocabulary acquisition. Recasting, which is, I know, what we're training or educating rather teachers to do, it's more complex. There are all those effective things involved, nice effective things with recasting, but the research is really mixed on the effectiveness of recast. Okay, I mentioned this already, so I'm not going to talk more about that. Okay, I'm going to give you, I'm uploading these in advance of the class. Okay. Yeah. And so go ahead and play around with these. These are just some various tools that Blake mentioned in the book. Voice to text. This is important for when he talks about iCall. And then he had gave you an overview of some of these. These are basically video reviews of the product, not just going to the publisher site. So have a look at that. And one thing that he mentioned, which is really true, and it's an invitation to you all to start using these tools for actual research, things like iSprach, that is, it's really a great tool. Go ahead. I'm not going to say much about it now, but go ahead and look at it and tell me what you think. But we're really not using these tools for research the way we should. He did say, some of you are familiar with VoiceThread. From a psycholinguistic perspective, things like VoiceThread are probably good because you have increased planning time. So you don't have that ephemeral type of situation where you're speaking and listening and trying to think about what you're going to speak while you're in the moment. And this planning time is really important for second language development. He talks about iCall near the end of the chapter. iCall creates a database to track learners' responses. And so every learner using an iCall program, it's collecting their data. And then it basically it can anticipate the nature of your error, and therefore gives you sculpted input, sculpted to a certain extent, rather than just saying no, try again, or giving you some generic guess at what the problem might be. One example of this is the eTutor by Trudy Heyft, and looks like it's a little slow, but you can go to that and see if it'll work for you. It works for me, but I actually have an account with it. But you can click on the overview, and that'll give you kind of a summary of what it does. She found, this is for German only, and it's really only one of 2 or 3 iCall things that are out there, which is very odd because there's been a lot of iCall research going on, but not a lot of products that learners can use. There's only this one for German, and then the other one's for Portuguese. She found that most of the students using her eTutor program revised the sentences based on this intelligent feedback. So they try something, get some intelligent feedback, sculpted feedback, but all the while they would have the option to just click on the answer and to get the right answer. And so this shows that it can be a great teaching tool because the learners do pay attention to the feedback and they don't peek at the answers. Yeah, and she found that explicit metalinguistic feedback helped them the most in terms of task completion. So look at that sentence, found that explicit metalinguistic feedback helped most for task completion. Didn't say help them learn the targets better, but they were able to complete the task better. And then here's the other one that is out there. Okay, I don't know any Portuguese. I haven't played around with this one at all, but feel free to go ahead and take a look at it. And he then talked about our beloved learning management systems. So I'm looking forward to the switch to Canvas. It can't be any worse than Blackboard. Learning management systems, according to Blake, excel at course and user, or this was Robert Godwin Jones actually that said this, I believe. They excel at course and user management, but they're not strong in content creation. And that's exactly right. It's basically to manage just putting a bunch of stuff online. So you have to find it and then put it online. And then it's good for grading and managing. But it does force the instructors to create content outside of the learner management system, especially for lesser languages, as you can imagine, where there's just not much there, where you have to create it yourself, for example. And you can imagine creating materials in Blackboard. I don't know, it's good for uploading things that are already created. LMS may constrain learning paths and learner agency. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And he suggested using more open spaces such as Padlet.com, and there was one other. I just gave you the link to the review of Padlet.com. Go ahead and take a look at that. Now, automated writing evaluation he mentioned as well, and we'll talk a little bit about this in class. But go ahead and have a look at that. I gave you a hot link here where it's just a Iowa State promo video basically, and it's fairly new. And what I would like to do, I have an email out to writing programs in the Department of English. I know some of you are in English. I'd really like to ask you if you've been introduced to anything like this, or if you would like to maybe pilot out some real research using automated writing evaluation. Now, a lot of the writing people will think this is something spawned by the devil himself. Okay, they're totally against automated writing evaluation, but I think the research shows that it can be helpful for writers to improve in improving linguistic accuracy. Okay, so not just to put teachers out of jobs, which is what everyone's afraid of, I suppose, or that it's better necessarily than a live, well-trained writer, but I think we have cost-benefit analysis where it can be used, yes, for evaluation, maybe not super high-stakes evaluation, but medium-stakes evaluation, but more importantly, it can be used as a together with instructional methods, right? Encourage students to engage in revising and better writing practices, right? And then the final thoughts, well, he suggests that social call has certainly surged, and we're all about true interactivity now, people communicating with people via the computer interface. But a lot of learning still occurs when we're alone, studying, taking the light rail and practicing, and so tutorial call does have a place. He also suggests that from the pedagogy research, teachers infrequently correct phonological and grammatical errors, and they tend to focus on discourse, content, and lexical errors. And so why not try to harness the power of Tutorial Call for this type of out-of-class learning, especially for things like pronunciation, if we have good speech recognition software, and as well as grammar and reviewing vocabulary. All right. So I hope this is helpful. I hope this will save us some time. It looks like it was about 20 minutes of me really flying through these. So if you do have a chance to look at it in advance, that would be helpful. I'm going to upload it so you can click on all those links, and maybe we'll get more mileage out of the 50 minutes chat we have about Chapter 4 on Wednesday. Okay? Have a good rest of the weekend and beginning of your week. See you on Halloween.